You know, when we think of John Calvin's Geneva, a certain image probably pops into your head, right? The stern, super disciplined city of saints. But what if I told you the story we've all been told isn't, well, the whole picture? For centuries, this one quote has pretty much defined how we see it. It's from the Scottish reformer John Knox, and he called Geneva the most perfect school of Christ. I mean, that phrase alone just cemented this image of a Protestant utopia, a flawless city on a hill with absolute religious purity and order. It's a powerful myth, for sure. But come on, was it really that simple? This powerful idea has shaped our view for centuries, but all you have to do is look at a map and a pretty big question comes up. Suddenly, that story of an isolated, totally pure city starts to look a little shaky. I mean, just look at it. Geographically, the city was basically a tiny Protestant island floating in a huge sea of Catholic territories. So you have to ask, how could it possibly exist in some kind of religious vacuum, totally cut off from its neighbors, its trading partners, and even the families of its own citizens? It just doesn't add up. So, to find the real answer, modern historians did something kind of brilliant. They started digging into the city archives, and they zeroed in on the records of the consistory. That's the church's disciplinary body that was in charge of, the morals of every single citizen. And guess what they found? It wasn't a record of flawless piety, not even close. What those records actually showed was something way more human, a constant, messy, ongoing struggle to make these new reformed ideals work in people's complicated, everyday lives.
And what these records show are all these small, consistent compromises. I mean, you see kids just ditching their mandatory catechism classes. There was even a fencing instructor holding his lessons at the exact same time. You see complex musical styles that Calvin himself wasn't a fan of. And the church even had to bend and accommodate the tradition of godparents, which, by the way, had no biblical basis. These aren't the signs of a perfect city, they're the signs of a real one.
Okay, so all these little cracks in the myth, they point to a reality that's so much more complex, and they've led historians to a totally new and really powerful way of understanding what was actually going on in the city. So here's the big idea. Historians don't see Geneva as this isolated religious fortress anymore. They see it as the center of a biconfessional region. Now, what does that mean? It means that even though the city was officially Protestant, its people were in constant, necessary, and regulated contact with the Catholic world that was literally right outside their gates. And this right here, this really gets to the heart of the tension. The official story, the rhetoric, was all about absolute purity and a complete break from Rome. But the lived reality for thousands of Genevans? That involved families that were part Protestant, part Catholic, constant contact with the Catholic world, and a surprising amount of just pragmatic compromise. So let's make this personal. Let's see how this actually played out for real people. Because those consistory records, they aren't just lists of rules. They are filled with these incredible stories of regular folks trying to navigate these two very different worlds. Okay, so take the case of a guy named Ros Tissot. He was a member in good standing of the Reformed Church in Geneva. But here's the catch. His family was Catholic, and they lived outside the city. So when his father died, he was faced with a choice that put his city's rules in direct conflict with his family's traditions. So what did he do? He chose family. The records show he left Geneva, he went to a Catholic mass for his father, and he participated in the whole burial. So, how in the world could he possibly be welcomed back into the most perfect school of Christ after openly taking part in what Calvinists considered straight-up idolatry? Well, believe it or not, the city actually had a system for this. It wasn't arbitrary. It was a clear, predictable process. Tissot went and fulfilled his family duty. He came back, he confessed, he made a public repentance, and he was accepted back into communion in time for the very next service. The whole thing was surprisingly quick. And this is the crucial point right here. This wasn't just about punishment. The speed and how often cases like this came up shows that the authorities kind of tacitly understood that family obligations, like going to your parents' funeral, were a valid, unavoidable reason for crossing these religious lines. And here's a really key distinction. The authorities didn't accuse Tissot of heresy. They didn't say he rejected his Protestant beliefs. They accused him of participating in idolatry, of doing a forbidden action. See the difference? By focusing on the action, not the belief, they made it so much faster and easier for people to get back into the community. It was kind of a brilliant piece of social engineering, really. So when you put all of these pieces together, the geography, the dusty old archives, the personal stories, a new, much more human picture of Geneva starts to emerge from behind that old myth.
It wasn't a sterile city of saints or religious zealots living in a bubble. No way. It was a city of real people making really difficult choices, constantly balancing their faith, their families, and their finances in a very, very complicated world.
At the end of the day, the real story of Calvin's Geneva isn't just about religious doctrine. It's this powerful lesson in looking past the official rhetoric to see how people actually lived. It shows us that rigid rules often hide these complex negotiations, and that a system of discipline can also be a clever system of reintegration, all designed to hold a fragile community together.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Questioning these simple, clean stories we learned about the past can reveal a reality that is way more challenging, way messier, and ultimately way more interesting. So what other perfect histories are out there, just waiting for us to discover their beautifully imperfect human reality?